Shadow work isn't optional. It's the price of becoming whole. Most people believe that spiritual awakening marks the end of suffering. That once you wake up, life becomes peaceful, effortless, free from emotional chaos. But the truth, for many, awakening feels like everything is breaking apart. You begin to see parts of yourself you've avoided your entire life. Childhood wounds, toxic patterns, hidden pain, all bubbling to the surface like they've been waiting in the dark for this moment. And that's terrifying. So why does it happen? Why does emotional turmoil increase after a spiritual breakthrough? And why did Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists in history, say, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious," because awakening doesn't delete your past, it illuminates it. And the moment we become more conscious, more spiritually aware, the shadow doesn't disappear, it becomes louder. This is the paradox. The more you awaken, the more you must face the parts of you that are still asleep. In this video, we're going deep into Carl Jung's concept of the shadow, how repressed emotions erupt after awakening, and why integration is not a choice, it's a necessity. We'll explore how to begin this process and what happens when you avoid it. Because let's be honest, you can't bypass your pain and expect wholeness. You can't just focus on love and light and expect your darkness to go away. True healing isn't just about reaching higher states. It's about digging deep, finding what you've buried, and bringing it into the light. This is the journey of becoming whole, not perfect, but whole. So if you're feeling lost after your awakening, if emotions are flooding you and nothing makes sense, don't worry. You're not broken. You're just meeting your shadow. And today, we'll walk through it together. Carl Gustav Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst who revolutionized our understanding of the human mind, while Freud focused on repressed desires and childhood trauma. Jung took a broader, more spiritual approach. He believed that the psyche wasn't just a container for dysfunction, it was a canvas for transformation. Jung introduced ideas that changed the landscape of modern psychology: the collective unconscious, archetypes, synchronicity, and most relevant to our journey, the shadow. So, what exactly is the shadow? The shadow is the part of yourself that you do not see. It's everything your conscious ego refuses to identify with: rage, fear, guilt, envy, but also your hidden confidence, wildness, sexuality, and creative fire. It includes both the ugly and the untamed. We create the shadow when we decide certain traits are unacceptable. Maybe your culture told you anger is bad. Maybe your parents shamed you for crying. Maybe you learn to hide your intelligence to be liked. All of that gets pushed down, but it doesn't go away. Jung described the shadow as the unknown dark side of the personality, and he warned that the less we face it, the more power it holds. It shows up in your projections, your triggers, your self-sabotage. You might think you hate someone else, but often, you're really hating the part of yourself they remind you of. That's projection, a shadow mechanism. But here's the beauty: the shadow isn't your enemy. Jung believed it was the key to wholeness. Integration doesn't mean indulging every dark impulse, it means meeting the shadow with honesty, compassion, and awareness. It means allowing your rejected parts to re-enter the conversation. Jung once said, "I'd rather be whole than good." That wasn't a rebellion, it was a truth bomb. To be whole, we must reclaim what we've abandoned. So when you're triggered, when shame or rage floods you, that's not a failure. That's a message from your shadow, asking to be seen. This is not a flaw in your awakening. This is the next step. And now that we've met the shadow, Let's understand what happens when it wakes up after you do. We live in a culture obsessed with light, high vibes only, good vibes only, love and light. It's everywhere from social media influencers to spiritual retreats. The message is clear. Enlightenment means being happy, glowing, calm, and untouched by suffering. But Carl Jung would say, that's not enlightenment, that's denial. There's a dangerous myth circulating in spiritual circles that once you awaken, the pain goes away, that if you meditate enough, align your chakras, or raise your frequency high enough, your trauma will simply dissolve. But here's what actually happens. You awaken, and your shadow awakens with you. Jung understood that awakening doesn't bypass your unconscious, it breaks it open. What was once hidden in the dark corners of your psyche now comes into view. Repressed emotions, long buried pain, internal conflicts, all of it comes flooding in. It's not a malfunction, it's a message. Because becoming more conscious doesn't just mean seeing the light, it means becoming aware of what's been in the dark all along. You start noticing your reactions. You realize how much of your life was spent on autopilot. You see the trauma loops, the projections, the patterns, and it can feel like you're falling apart. This is where many people quit the path. They think, this can't be right. I must be doing something wrong. But in truth, you're doing something very, very right. This is the sacred moment Jung spoke of, when the unconscious begins to emerge. You are entering the real work, the confrontation with the shadow, not just meditation cushions and incense, but triggers, breakdowns, and emotional release. It's messy, it's painful, but it's real. Jung believed that the darkness isn't there to destroy you, it's there to be integrated. Enlightenment, in his view, wasn't the absence of darkness. It was the ability to hold both light and dark without judgment. So if your spiritual journey hasn't felt like an endless Instagram highlight reel, good, that means you're actually doing the work. Real awakening doesn't look like bliss, it looks like truth. And sometimes, the most spiritual thing you can do is feel everything you've tried not to feel. Repressed emotions aren't gone. They're just waiting, and often, they wait until the moment you're most vulnerable, right after awakening. When you were younger, you learned what emotions were acceptable and which ones weren't. Maybe you were told not to cry. Maybe anger was punished. Maybe expressing fear made you feel weak or unlovable. So, you adapted. You pushed those emotions down, locked them away, and built a version of yourself that felt safe. But those emotions didn't disappear. They went underground into the unconscious. And when you experience a spiritual awakening, the walls between the conscious and unconscious begin to thin. The light of awareness reaches deeper. And what does it find? Everything you've buried. Repressed emotions don't come back gently. They return through anxiety, depression, sudden rage, confusion, emotional flashbacks. They speak through your body, tight shoulders, stomach knots, chronic fatigue. They hijack your thoughts, drive impulsive behavior, and cloud your ability to stay present. This isn't just emotional overload, it's backlog, decades of denied pain rushing to be felt. Carl Jung believed that what we repress doesn't just vanish. It becomes autonomous. It gains power and secrecy. And if you don't face it, it will live through you, projecting itself onto your relationships, your worldview, even your spiritual beliefs. You might criticize someone's selfishness, only to later realize it's your own unexpressed desire to set boundaries. Or feel intense jealousy, not because you're small-minded, but because you've denied your own potential. This is why triggers are sacred. They are spotlights pointing to the exiled parts of you, not indicators of failure, but invitations to grow. But instead of listening, we're taught to numb. We overwork, scroll endlessly, dive into self-help books looking for a fix that avoids feeling, or we swing to the other extreme, pretending everything is fine in the name of positivity. Jung wasn't interested in comfort, he was interested in authenticity, and authentic healing means feeling emotions you never gave yourself permission to feel. Repressed emotions aren't obstacles, they are portals. They reveal what's unfinished, they guide you back to your wholeness. And the healing doesn't come from analyzing them to death. It comes from allowing them to move through your body, crying when the tears come, screaming when the rage erupts, shaking, breathing, expressing without shame, because once those emotions are seen, felt, and honored, they lose control, and you regain your power. Feeling isn't weakness, it's the doorway to integration. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This isn't poetry. It's a warning and a map. The shadow doesn't vanish because you read spiritual books, attend ceremonies, or memorize affirmations. It's patient, it waits, it adapts, and over time, if left unaddressed, it becomes the hidden architect of your suffering. One way or another, it will be seen. The question is, will you face it consciously? Or will life force it upon you? Shadow work isn't a self-help trend. It's not a weekend workshop. It's the slow, sacred art of becoming honest with yourself. And it often begins in pain, a breakup, a breakdown, a health crisis, financial collapse. These aren't failures, they're invitations. Wake-up calls from the unconscious, demanding to be heard. We like to believe we're in control of our lives, but if you've ever found yourself repeating the same toxic relationship, sabotaging your success, or reacting with intensity you couldn't explain, you felt the shadow at work. These patterns aren't random, they're messages, and every message ignored becomes a louder lesson. Jung believed the shadow holds more than our wounds, it holds our vitality. That inside every suppressed fear is also a fragment of power. Creativity, sensuality, courage, the very parts you've disowned are the ones you need to feel fully alive. When you begin to face the shadow, you reclaim yourself piece by piece. But here's the truth, this process is painful. It requires surrender. It forces you to question everything you thought was you. The identity you built to survive may not be the one that leads you to thrive. Shadow work isn't about fixing yourself. It's about remembering who you were before the world taught you to hide. Jung was deeply influenced by myths, especially the hero's journey. In every story, the hero must descend into the underworld, face the monster, and emerge transformed. That descent, that's shadow work. The monster, it's your fear, your guilt, your shame. But here's what those myths remind us. The treasure you seek is guarded by the very dragon you fear, and that treasure is wholeness. Spiritual growth isn't linear. It's not an escalator to bliss. It's a spiral, a descent into the self before a rise into authenticity. You circle back through your pain not because you failed but because you're healing at a deeper level, and you can't fake this work. You can't skip steps. You can't bypass the grief, the rage, the vulnerability. You meet them. You feel them. You survive them. And in doing so, you become more real. That's why so few walk this path, not because it's impossible but because it's inconvenient. It dismantles the ego. It humbles you, but it also liberates you. Shadow work isn't optional. It's the soul's rite of passage. And once you begin, you'll never be the same. You'll be something better. You'll be whole. Okay, so you're ready to face your shadow. But how do you actually do it? Carl Jung didn't leave us with vague philosophy. He gave us tools, practical ways to interact with the unconscious and begin the process of integration. Shadow work isn't a one-time ritual. It's a lifelong dialogue with the parts of you that are asking to be seen. One of Jung's most powerful techniques is called active imagination. It's like conscious dreaming. You take an image, emotion, or character that emerges from your unconscious and engage with it. Talk to it, ask it questions, let it speak back. This isn't you going crazy, this is you accessing your own psyche. Jung believed this practice allowed the conscious and unconscious minds to meet in a space of mutual respect. Another pillar of Jung's work is dream analysis. Your dreams are like nightly messages from the unconscious. They speak in symbols, not logic. Start keeping a dream journal. Write down your dreams the moment you wake up. Ask what each element might represent in you, not someone else, but you. Over time, you'll begin to notice patterns and symbols that point to what your unconscious is trying to resolve. Then there's emotional tracking. This is shadow work in real time. When you get triggered, pause, feel the emotion fully. Ask yourself, where have I felt this before? What does this remind me of? What belief is fueling this reaction? You'll often find that today's trigger is echoing an old, unhealed wound. Journaling is an accessible and powerful practice, but not the polished kind. This is shadow journaling, raw, unfiltered, messy. Give the disowned parts of yourself a voice. Let your anger speak. Let your jealousy rant. Let your fear confess. This isn't about being nice, it's about being honest. You can also work with projections. Notice the people who provoke you, the ones who make you irrationally angry or envious, or the ones you idolize. Ask yourself, what am I seeing in them that lives in me? This doesn't mean you condone bad behavior, it means you explore why it affects you so deeply. And remember, the goal of shadow work is not to fix yourself, it's to accept yourself. This work is intense, it brings up resistance, doubt, fear, even grief. Some days it feels like progress, others like regression. That's normal. The unconscious doesn't open with force. It opens with trust. Create safety. Go slow. Be compassionate. This is a sacred relationship, not a to-do list. If you need help, find a Jungian therapist, trauma-informed coach, or join a group doing this work. You don't have to walk through the dark alone. And always remember, this isn't punishment. This is power. Every emotion you've locked away holds a lesson. Every trigger is an invitation. Every descent brings you closer to your truth. You're not broken for needing this work. You're brave for choosing it. Because the real healing doesn't come from avoiding the shadow. It comes from turning toward it and listening. Most people think healing is about becoming someone new. But Carl Jung taught the opposite. It's not about becoming someone else, it's about becoming who you are always meant to be. That's the essence of individuation, Jung's term for the lifelong journey of becoming whole. Not perfect, not enlightened, whole. That means integrating all parts of yourself, the light and the dark, the known and unknown, the celebrated and the shamed. Individuation isn't about self-improvement, it's about self-inclusion. It's the path of returning to the original self, before the world told you who to be. It's not about reaching a peak. It's about weaving every fragment into one coherent soul. As you move through shadow work, something begins to shift. You no longer fear the intensity of your feelings. You learn to pause in the discomfort. You stop seeing triggers as threats and start seeing them as teachers. And little by little, the parts you once exiled begin to return not as enemies, but as allies. You realize that you're not just the version of yourself that others accept. You're also the wild parts, the moody parts, the unsure parts. You are complexity. And all of it is sacred. Healing, in this framework, is less about fixing what's broken and more about reclaiming what was abandoned. You're not trying to be better than you were, you're trying to be more you than you've ever allowed yourself to be. And that's where peace starts to rise. Not from getting everything right, but from living in alignment. That quiet sense of inner coherence that says, I'm not hiding anymore. The more you integrate, the more emotionally resilient you become. You stop overreacting because you're no longer ruled by unconscious wounds. You stop people pleasing because your worth is no longer tied to external approval. You show up more authentically in relationships because you're no longer afraid of being seen fully. You also begin to develop true empathy. When you've sat with your own shame, your own grief, your own contradictions, it's hard to judge others for theirs. You realize that everyone is carrying a story, a wound, a shadow, and that understanding softens you. This is what Jung meant by individuation, a mature, rooted sense of self that includes everything you are and excludes nothing. You become someone who can hold complexity, contradiction, and truth all at once, and no, it's not a finish line. It's a spiral. You'll revisit old pain with new eyes. You'll reintegrate parts you thought you'd already healed. That's not failure. That's evolution. Becoming whole doesn't mean the darkness vanishes. It means you've built a relationship with it. A dialogue. A trust. And in that wholeness, there is freedom. Today, shadow work is trending. It's on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. Everyone's talking about triggers, trauma, and doing the inner work. And while it's amazing to see people becoming more open to self-awareness, there's a hidden danger of oversimplification. The internet has turned shadow work into a buzzword. It's been watered down, dressed up, and sold as another step in your morning routine. Now it looks like filling out worksheets in a candlelit room or using trendy audio to talk about your healing journey. These things aren't wrong, but they're not the work. Shadow work isn't aesthetic. It's not pretty. It's often not shareable. And it's definitely not always Instagram friendly. One of the most common misconceptions is that awareness is enough. People say, well, I know I have abandonment issues, or I'm aware of my anger, and think that's integration. But Jung warned us, awareness is only the beginning. True shadow work requires emotional digestion. You must feel, process, and sit with what you've uncovered. Then there's the myth of speed. 30-day shadow work challenge. One journaling prompt to heal your inner child. These ideas make it sound like healing is linear, quick, and easy. It's not. Real integration is non-linear. It's cyclical. You revisit old wounds again and again, each time with more depth, not because you're stuck, but because you're evolving. Toxic positivity is another trap. The belief that high vibes and good thoughts are all you need. That if you're sad or angry, you're doing something wrong. But real healing honors the full spectrum of emotion. Sometimes growth feels like grief. Sometimes awakening feels like falling apart. That's normal. Lastly, there's the myth of isolation, the idea that you should do this alone. But we all have blind spots. That's why working with a therapist, guide, or trusted community can be powerful. Sometimes others can hold a mirror you can't see. So yes, It's good that shadow work is more visible, but let's not turn it into another wellness trend. You don't do this work to be seen. You do it to truly see yourself. Shadow work isn't just personal, it's collective. Carl Jung warned that the unconscious forces we battle within ourselves also play out on a global stage. The emotions we suppress don't just disappear, they magnify. They echo through our cultures, governments, religions, and relationships. Just as individuals project their shadows onto others, so do societies. We label others as evil, inferior, or dangerous, without ever questioning what within us is being reflected back. We create systems that replicate our unacknowledged shadows: greed, control, violence, denial. We see it everywhere: political polarization, racial tension, climate denial, the rise of extremism. These aren't just political issues, they're psychological ones. They're the shadow breaking through the collective unconscious, demanding recognition. Jung believed that if humanity failed to integrate its shadow, it would face destruction. Not because we're doomed, but because projection on a mass scale leads to war, oppression, and environmental collapse. But here's the hope: when you do your inner work, you break the cycle. Every time you take ownership of your anger, your fear, your grief, you remove it from the collective field. You become a clearer mirror, not a distorted one. Personal healing becomes a contribution to collective harmony. The more we take responsibility for our own darkness, the less we need to demonize others. Healing yourself isn't selfish, it's service. This is why shadow work matters now more than ever. We're not just healing for ourselves, we're healing for the world we're shaping together. Because a fractured planet is the reflection of fractured people, and wholeness begins one courageous soul at a time. So now you understand why shadow work isn't optional. It's not a spiritual accessory. It's not a passing phase. It's the most courageous and transformative work you can do for yourself and for the world around you. Carl Jung didn't give us a polished formula. He gave us a path through the unknown, one that demands truth, integrity, and radical self-honesty. You've seen how the shadow doesn't vanish after awakening, it rises. You've learned how repressed emotions continue to shape your life until you make them conscious. And you've witnessed how integration isn't about becoming perfect, it's about becoming real. This is the work of becoming whole, not in theory but in practice. So what now? Start by turning inward. Reflect on what you've avoided. Notice what triggers you and explore why. Journal without filters. Watch your dreams. Speak the truth you've been holding in. And when it gets messy, breathe. You're not doing it wrong, you're doing it deeply. Remember, there's no rush. This is sacred work. And even when it hurts, it's a sign that something is healing. If this video gave you clarity or helped you reconnect with your own process, consider giving it a like. Share it with someone walking their own path, and subscribe for more content on shadow integration, conscious healing, and the psychology of becoming whole. The world doesn't need more perfection. It needs more people who've made peace with their darkness, because real peace doesn't come from escaping the dark. It comes from turning toward it with the light of awareness.